What's going on, YouTube? I know you guys were waiting for the updated Valby video, and here it is. Let's start out with her base kit. We have Bubble Bullet, Plop Plop, Cleanup, Laundry Bomb, and her passive, Water Intake. She is a non-attribute based character. Starting from the top, we have Bubble Bullet. Fires a bouncing bubble bullet. Where the bubble bullet impacts, it creates a small puddle at the point of collision. Enemies who touch the small puddle will take continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. The bubble bullet explodes upon hitting the enemy or after bouncing a maximum number of times, dealing burst damage on nearby enemies. Burst damage increases with the number of times bubble bullet bounces. So if you look over to the right on the basic info, base cooldown of 10 seconds, a mana cost of 36, skill power X 469.5. That is the damage from the bubble bullet itself, the bouncing ball. Default radius is 1.5. Has no projectile speed because the speed can change and vary depending on the slope or elevation you're dropping it from. It can bounce back towards you. Sometimes it'll be very unreliable, but as you play Valby, I'm sure you'll learn to finesse it and how to use it to its fullest. Damage increase per count, that is per bounce count. It is a 25% increase, meaning that if you bounce this 4 times, that's a 100% increase. When you're starting out with a number like 469.5, you can start to see some pretty large numbers from Bubble Bullet. The small puddle, continuous damage, skill power X 31%. The damage interval is every 1 second. Base duration 10 seconds. Base range 3 meters. Maximum expandable range is 200%, so we could get that up to 9 meters. The laundry debuff itself, which is inflicted through all of Valby's abilities, base duration is 20 seconds, and it lowers the electric and non-attribute resistance by 20%. Valby is buffing herself and others by leaving a water debuff on the enemy. Going into the next ability, we have Plop Plop, basically a teleport. We have the description here: forms a big puddle at a designated location, emerges from the big puddle and inflicts knockdown on nearby enemies. Enemies standing in the big puddle receive continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. Like I said, laundry comes from all of her abilities. The skill's cooldown decreases proportionally to the number of enemies inflicted with the knockdown. So if you use this into a crowd of enemies, this ability plus whatever CDR that you already have will virtually have little to no cooldown. If you look at the details, you have the base cooldown at 25 seconds, the mana cost 48. On hitting enemy, cooldown decreases by 2.0 seconds. Since you lower your cooldown to not just make this insanely strong, it lowers how much of a deduction you also get. Maximum cooldown reduction, the base of 10 seconds. Then you have what I'm assuming is a typo, but instead of big puddle, it says bug puddle. It's supposed to be big puddle. Continuous damage, skill power X28, damage interval 1 second, duration 15 seconds, range 6 meters, like previously on Bubble Bullet. Max expandable range 200%. We're gonna take 12 meters and add it to the 6. Maximum range that we could have is 18 meters. And again, another laundry application. Moving to the third ability, we have Cleanup. Activates liquefied state while liquefied does not collide with enemies and creates a waterway on the ground. Enemies standing in the waterway take continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. In the liquefied state, cannot jump or use skills. Not jumping part, it does get on my nerves a little bit when you hit a little curve, but this ability is amazing. Let's look at the base info for it. Maximum stacks 2. This means you have 2 charges. Stack cooldown 22 seconds each. MP cost 50. In the liquefied state, duration is 5 seconds. Movement speed is 1,000. They're calculating the movement speed similar to the movement speed of weapons. I believe your base sprint movement speed is 800. Some other abilities like on Vyasa will say like 30% movement speed increase, or Bunny has a percentage increase as well. Keep that in mind. Damage reduction 50. That means while you are skating around and clean up, you're going to take 50% less damage. This is why a lot of people ask me like, oh, I don't need defense. This is why. She naturally has a 50% DR ability, which is massive. We have Waterway, the water you're leaving behind. Continuous damage, skill power X 138.5. Damage interval 1 second, duration 15 seconds, range is 2 meters, expandable by 200%. Again, we could get this up to 6 meters. The reason I want to emphasize the 138.5 here is because if you look at her other water sources, they do not have such a high multiplier. Bubble Bullet has a big burst multiplier, but its water is, it's a little better than Plop Plop. But here's the thing. When you build, you need to make decisions. Are you going to go non-attribute fusion? Are you going to go non-attribute dimension? You can see the value of the mobility abilities, them both being non-attribute dimension, why I always lean towards non-attribute dimension. Not to say there isn't room for a fusion build and like maybe going for a very strong bullet. Definitely possible. This ability also applies laundry. Again, the 20% deduction of non-attribute and electric resistance. But moving on to the last ability, we have laundry bomb. Now when the game content gets harder, maybe we have another world tier, I believe this ability has huge potential. As the game is right now, this is probably my least used ability. You can actually hold your laundry launcher and then go into a cleanup or plop plop or use any of her other abilities. Going over the description, equip a unique weapon. It will be unequipped when the duration ends or all the bullets have been used. The projectile impact of the unique weapon creates a laundry bomb, dealing continuous damage and inflicting toad on nearby enemies with laundry. There are sets such as the Slayer set that have a toad proc, but as a whole, I don't really see the value in the Slayer set compared to some of the other sources of damage you can get. The continuous damage increases based on the number of enemies with laundry. So if you were to stack up a bunch of mobs and get them all debuffed and suck them into this, it's gonna do a lot of damage. But like I said, things just die really quick in the current difficulties we have. And this could be huge if we get harder content or a stronger world. Let's get into the base information. We have a cooldown of 30 seconds, a mana cost of 40. You have 3 shots in the laundry launcher, the duration 20 seconds. And something to take note of is the duration here. This is not how long the laundry bombs work. It is how long you can hold the launcher. So you hold it for 20 seconds base. The laundry bomb itself, continuous damage, skill power X 39.1, damage interval 0.5, duration 3.1 seconds. That is the actual projectile duration. Continuous damage range is 2 meters. Traction range is 8 meters. That's something to note, is that you will actually pull enemies in that are outside the bubble. Doesn't necessarily need to hit them. Max expandable range is 200%. Now, when you increase the bubble's range, it's increasing that external 8-meter traction range. I did do a little testing. I had a very large bubble, almost max range, and it seemed like the 8 meters was starting from the outside of that bubble. But the 8 meters is flat no matter what. Your damage increase per entity is 25%, which is a large amount, but like I said, they just die really quick. Max damage increase 200%, so you can benefit from pulling up to 8 mobs. And then as always, you get the laundry effect from using this. Then we have Valby's base passive skill, water intake. When using skills while on water, MP cost decreases. Puddles created by skills are also considered to be water. Something to note is that puddles and water itself are also benefiting you here. Other Valbys are also creating water and puddles. Now that we've gone over her kit, let's see how you can manipulate it. With Valby's modules, you have a lot of different options that you can go with her depending on what kind of build you want to go. In today's build, we're going to show the one I play with, the one that I recommend to most people for a mobbing style Valby that is also capable of bossing. It is not going to excel the most at bossing unless you really build it that way. But the way forma slots in this game work, unfortunately, you get kind of held in place once you commit, unless you're going to be spending a catalyst every single time you want to change activity you're doing. If you play this game, you know that is extremely expensive. We're not looking to do that. We're kind of looking for a extremely good mobber and a boss killer. Not going to elevate the most into boss killing. We have supply moisture. At first glance, it says while on water, increases skill critical hit rate, skill duration, and firearm attribute trigger rate. Removes the reduction to MP when you're in water. So it does do those things, but it actually does a little bit more. As you can see, we have a green ability here. These ones that turn green are your Transcendent mod, changing one of your abilities. So if we hover over our passive now, you can see that we get a 2% trigger rate increase, a 20% firearm critical hit rate increase, a 20% skill critical hit rate increase, and a 10% skill duration up. Now the way that these values go into Valby isn't the traditional way of other modules or sub attributes or components that you roll. The way that this is calculated into the formula of everything is adding to the base value, just straight up additive to the base value. Valby herself has a 5% crit chance as a character. When you take that 5%, I would say if you don't have supply moisture, it's almost a waste to spend too much of your resources capacity wise going into crit chance and crit damage and all those things. I have a 64.6 critical rate increase, and if I were to look at what that affects my 5% with, I only gain a 3.23% crit chance from all the additional crit that I'm influencing it with. Not really that much, right? I don't know if you want to spend a bunch of capacity just to gain 3% crit. However, since Supply Moisture's passive is adding 20% crit, the investment that I've made for extra crit rate becomes even more valuable because we are taking that 5% base, turning it into a 25% bait. Now that 64% crit or whatever it was that I had is now turning into a profit of around 16.15%. Obviously you can see the value of this. Like I said, this also applies to weapons. You could take a weapon, whether it's got a high base crit rate or a low base crit rate, and excel it even further. We can do the same example. You can look at my hand cannon with the investments of crit chance that I have. It's at 46.5. When I stand in my water, it is now at 72.4. Similar to Valby is the Python. You see I'm at 29.55 on a gun that I would naturally have 5% on. This one module can literally create an entire archetype of Valby playstyle. Before you have supply and moisture, a lot of crit in general is irrelevant to you. On weapons, that's one thing, but we're talking about Descendant module wise. Once you have supply and moisture, it opens up a whole new lane of ways you can take her, as far as like focusing on a lot of crit damage, crit chance, and actually receiving a lot of benefits from it. So I would highly recommend everyone to use supply moisture. All of Valby's other Transcendent mods are not that good. Now that you can see the insane value from supply moisture, it is very difficult to shine a light on any other Transcendent mod. Supply moisture is by far the cream of the crop, and I would argue that even when Ultimate Valby comes out, unless her base crit chance, crit damage changes, if you're only getting a raise in defense, health, those base character stats, it might not even really be worth it to invest in the character unless you want the cosmetic. Maybe it eventually comes out with the Evo skin or whatever else. But we can quickly glance at the other Transcendent mods just to show you how much further this elevates in comparison. We have water play. It removes the bubble bullet and just simply gives you a rectangle shaped water. Now this water source is reliable, but to get rid of that huge hitting bubble, I don't think it's worth it for a square of water in front of you. We have tidal wave, removes the watery trail from cleanup. This is your biggest surface area of water that you can create. And not only that, if we go back to the base kit that we were going over earlier, this is the highest damage source of water that you can create. To remove it in my mind is silly. And then we have singing water. This turns your laundry bomb into a taunt where mobs are just aggressive towards it, they gravitate towards it and just get sucked in. Now if we had harder content, you were playing a true Valby support build, this could have some use, but again, things just die extremely fast in this game. Not a real reason to spend whatever money you're going to spend reducing the capacity cost on this, or even just having it take any capacity cost in general. You're better off using no Transcendent mods, in my opinion, if you do not have supply and moisture. Until you get this is going to be that cherry on top, the goal you should be chasing as a Valby player. Heading back to our modules, we'll see how I have her set up. So we have supply and moisture, dimension specialist, nimble fingers, focus on non-attribute, time distribution, increased HP, emergency measures, skill expansion, skill extension, MP collector, skill concentration, and finally long distance maneuvering. This slot where I have MP collector is an interchangeable slot for me. It's a support tech ultimate mod. You can only have one of those. So what I'm usually using in this slot, depending on the content that I'm facing, is MP collector, decimator, or lethal infection. I do need to rank up my lethal infection, but for bossing, I'd prefer to have lethal infection. On a day-to-day with Valby, if you're going to be doing easy content, I would probably recommend to have MP collector. It just kind of makes it a brainless farm with your mana. You don't need to go around and kind of fiend for mana orbs. You're just mobbing and going along with your day. Now, if you're doing anything difficult, or maybe a more condensed farm where you're bouncing back and forth and you are just killing 2 spawns of mobs, you could definitely drop MP collector and pick up decimator. You're going to be receiving the maximum benefits from decimator most likely almost instantly, which goes up to a 50% skill power modifier at max stacks. This is what I have in most of the time when I am playing Valby. I do put in MP collector when I'm doing a like gold farm or something like that, where I'm going a little bit further out of range and I don't need to go out of my way to pick up mana. It's nice to just be floating around, dropping water, not caring about picking up anything, right? But if I'm in a condensed farm, decimator is the way. As I mentioned before, there are many different ways that you could take Valby. This is simply the way that I go about taking her. One thing I've had people ask me about is why I use Dimension Specialist over Technician. This is an increase in skill power modifier. I think this caps out around 50.8, and your Dimension skill power modifier caps at 76.1. If we look at what my values are at the moment, I do have the Dimension skill power up to 0.761. Now, you do not have a skill power modifier as is. So if you add that, you do get an additional bonus here. This might vary from ability to ability. Like I said, only 2 of her abilities are dimension. For my testing, I got more value out of using dimension skill power modifier. You guys get any other results with what you're messing with? I'd like to know. You could tell me in the comments. That is why I use dimension skill power modifier instead of just a flat technician. Obviously we have CDR, non-attribute, because all of our abilities are non-attribute. I do not really gear myself with defense, so time distribution with the extra 52.4% max HP, increased HP with the extra 218.5 is huge. In my opinion, that's all I need with my current Valby setup. What you see me using is not the best end all be all Valby setup. This is a game that you're going to be playing for your own entertainment. It is a PvE game, so you should have fun shooting things and just using what you want to use. Judging by the name of the channel here, I'm sure you can understand why I prefer using precision weapons. The hand cannon is my daily driver. I use this all the time. In an ideal world, I wouldn't even have colossi damage here, just weak point damage. These things are expensive to reroll and it's going to take time. When I'm trying to work on all these other weapons as well, I can kind of stretch myself thin on gold. So for now, we got the colossi damage. It's a useful stat. When I stack up enough to reroll it to weak point, I will. I'll quickly look at the mods for this, but I don't want to go into too much detail. I could get more damage from this thing. However, I want it to have a fast reload. It has a hand cannon. I don't want to nerf the reload by 30% just to squeeze out another 10 or 15 crit damage. I don't think that's really that great, but you know, to each their own. This is my daily driver and I want it to drive well. If we look at the stats of this weapon, I have a 79.3 thousand firearm attack with additional 49.9 thousand electric bonus. This thing hits hard. And in my water, I have over a 70% crit chance, a 3.7 crit damage multiplier, 2.9 weak point. This thing is a beast. If you want something that hits even harder and once fully set up will obviously shoot even slower, less bullets in the mag, you can definitely go for the perforator. But for me, again, this is my daily use weapon. I don't want something that I'm reloading every 6 shots. 8 isn't that much more, but realistically that's 2 more kills. There becomes a point where you're like overkilling a lot of mobs open world with a hand cannon anyway. The perforator is great, do not get me wrong. I'm not saying it's bad. I just think the perforator is more of a, you want the most damage, the biggest pack of punch that you could possibly have. You go for that for a precision weapon. I will say this though, one of the best weapons for Valby is easily the Python. Python is insane. Not only do you get a benefit from its unique ability, the non-attribute resistance per stack, this can literally hit maximum resistance or maximum pen of resistance. The Python overall works like Valby with the crit rate. By default, it has a super low crit chance, but in the water, you're pushing that up and it's just going to be even more valuable to stack crit chance and crit damage on this thing. Opposed to almost every other character in the game, I think Enzo is the only other one that can do something similar, but she can actually turn a non-critting weapon into a critting one. And the burst damage that you see out of your mag with this thing is absolutely insane. You can look at the stats. I have 20,000 firearm attack with an additional 6k toxic. It is just a beast of a weapon. If I were going to say which weapons would probably work best for Valby, given the nature of her abilities, if you're going for a skill power build, maxing out the Blue Beetle would be insanely valuable. You could probably get close to a 100% skill crit hit chance with the Blue Beetle maxed out. This thing could be crazy for a skill build. If you are looking for just general round, huge burst damage on a boss, then there are a couple guns I would look at. The Python is going to be the king of burst damage for Valby. There isn't going to be a single gun in the game that can peak like the Python peaks in a burst window. Now, keep in mind, it's an SMG. It's going to go through its clip insanely fast. That is a burst window. If you're looking for the highest DPS uptime on Valby, then you're going to be leaning more towards the LMGs. A lot of people like the Tamer, and you know, the Tamer is a great gun. I'm not going to sit here and argue that it isn't, but for my view of all the weapons, I personally, if I were to go LMG, is the Enduring Legacy. I believe Valby with the Enduring Legacy, with the fire attack roll on it, could be one of the most insane damage setups on Valby that you could possibly do. Tinfoil hatting here, but that is my assumption. After looking at all the other weapons, I almost have all of the ultimate weapons, by the way. That, to me, if I were going the LMG approach, hands down would do that. Moving over to the components, we have reactors. The devotion is my daily driver. I would suggest you get a mount of your proper weapon. Going back to the whole Tamer discussion, Tamer is a purple weapon. You're not going to get a ultimate mounting from that. And on skill power, it might not seem like much, but Valby's skill power can tick a lot. If you're going for very short boss kills, this is again why I emphasize that the Enduring Legacy could be better, because you're going to down that boss. That boss is going to be sitting in your water. An extra 20% on your skill power for its ticks is going to be huge. If you're going for the utmost damage on Valby's reactor, you're going to go non-attribute and you're going to go skill critical hit damage. You could go some colossi damage again if you're doing some boss, but I like across the board buffs, not just like one thing or the other. I do want to get another reactor. I have a second reactor that I use when I have my Python. Thing is amazingly rolled for crit, not the highest damage that you're going to see, but it is insane for crit. It's 0.2 away from double max stat. So this thing is crazy. As you're a Valby player, I would have a reactor for each weapon type that you're using to level up, because Valby has the luxury of just holding the weapon and skating around and killing things. So you might as well have that extra skill damage while you're doing it. You're trying to level up a certain weapon, keep it in your main hand, use the other mounting, take the benefits. As far as the components go, at the moment I'm 2-piece decimator, 2-piece odd. I don't have set pieces here. They're just simply for max HP and the stats that they give me. These sub attribute stats on this are kind of whatever. It's just a big boost to max HP. When I'm mobbing on Valby, I usually just have a kind of boost set, whether that's gold, proficiency, drop rate. I do have another piece with double drop rate, so I tend to use this. I have another one that's like double gold. I don't really need shards as much anymore, but having a modular drop rate is nice. In my opinion, one of the best sets that you can get for Valby with the way supply moisture works and everything is probably going to be a veteran set. If you're going for a like insane crit chance build, you could do 2-piece veteran, 2-piece decimator. I lean towards just mobbing most of the time, but if I'm going for the maximum damage, fastest kills on Valby surprisingly are going to be with weapons. Again, I would personally lean for the 4-piece veteran, but I do see there room for a 2-piece. They would both be 5.1% crit, which, you know, it's 10.2% together. These are calculated in similar to like your mods and all the other sort. So to each your own. When I'm out in my day-to-day gameplay, I usually have drop chance increases and stuff like that on all of my gear. This is what I use for the most part. I'm currently sitting at 15.3k health, 2k defense, 939 max shield, skill power is at 11.7. You have firearm attack, you know, based on the weapon, it doesn't really matter. Max MP 243. So there you have it. There is my loadout for Valby, my suggestions for different weapons. If you want to take Valby in a different direction, you definitely can. I really wish that formas work differently so I could truly show you guys, you know, a potential fusion build or anything of the sort. The game really bottlenecks you and your decisions you make, so you got to choose wisely. So I choose to make my Valby really good at mobbing, and because of the way supply moisture works, my boss takedown capabilities are purely based on my gun and my water. However, if you're going for like a world fastest kill, then there are a few things you could probably change to really do that. Just before I released the video today, they did come out with patch notes for the downtime last night, and they did fix shot focus, which is a firearm attack buff while nerfing your skill power. This could be the play for a quick Valby boss kill, but we just have to test it out. I mean, the firearm is a massive source of damage, so we'll see. We'll test it out, maybe upload a video of some boss killing. They also did nerf this farm here in the outskirts. It's not nearly as good and lucrative as it used to be. While we talk over some gameplay, I just want to say thank you everyone in my chat for just helping me out test things with Valby. I will be uploading more content in the future. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I'll try to get back to them, or you can come by the stream at twitch.tv/SniperNamedG. I appreciate all the support, guys, and I hope you have a great one.